Aiden Cross lived a life of quiet rhythm and deliberate calm. As a landscape architect in Seattle, his world revolved around design sketches, late-night coffee, and long walks through the city's green parks. He wasn't the type who chased excitement. To him, beauty lay in balance, in symmetry, in detail, in the things people often overlooked. Love was something distant, an abstract idea meant for novels and films, not for someone as practical as him. But fate has a curious way of showing up when least expected. It was a gray Saturday afternoon, and the city was draped in mist. Aiden had stopped by a local flower market on Pine Street to pick up plants for a client's project. The market was lively. Soft jazz playing from a corner stall, the air filled with the scent of roses, rain, and fresh soil. As he moved through the rows of blossoms, his attention caught on a woman standing a few feet away, struggling to keep her umbrella from flipping in the wind. She was laughing, not embarrassed, just genuinely amused at her own battle with the weather. Her laughter was light, effortless, the kind that turns heads without even trying. Aiden found himself smiling. "Need a hand?" he called out. She looked up, her gray eyes meeting his. "Only if you know how to tame umbrellas," she teased. He stepped closer, steadying the stubborn umbrella with one hand. "I'm better with blueprints, but I'll try." She chuckled. "That's good enough." As the umbrella calmed, she extended her hand with a grin. Lila Monroe. Aiden Cross. They shook hands, and something, subtle yet undeniable, passed between them. They started talking as they wandered through the flower stalls. Lila was a travel photographer back in Seattle for a short while after years abroad. She told him about chasing sunsets in Santorini, capturing faces in Istanbul, and finding stories in the smallest of places. Her eyes lit up as she spoke, her voice carrying that rare blend of confidence and curiosity. Aiden listened quietly, his usual reserve melting into fascination. "You sound like you live inside moments," he said softly. Lila smiled. "And you? You sound like you design them." The market buzzed around them, vendors calling out prices, the rain tapping lightly on awnings. But in that moment, the world felt narrowed to just the two of them. As they reached the end of the market, Lila turned to him. "Do you like coffee?" Aiden smiled faintly. "I like good company more." "Then you'll love this little cafe around the corner," she said. "Come on." They walked together under her now peaceful umbrella. The cafe she mentioned was small and charming, tucked between an antique shop and a bookstore. Warm light spilled from its windows, and the smell of cinnamon and espresso wrapped around them the moment they stepped inside. They sat by the window. Rain streaked the glass while conversation flowed effortlessly. From art to travel to the strange ways people fall into each other's lives. Aiden found himself telling her things he hadn't said aloud in years, about his love for solitude, his quiet fears of opening up, his obsession with design perfection. Lila listened closely, her expression soft. "You know," she said, "you remind me of a photograph, carefully composed but hiding something unspoken in the shadows." He chuckled. "That's poetic." "That's honest," she replied. Hours passed like minutes. When they finally realized how long they'd been talking, it was already dusk. She stood, gathering her coat. "I should go. Early flight tomorrow." "Back to traveling?" he asked. "Just a short trip," she said with a small smile. "But I always come back." They walked outside together. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the soft glow of streetlights. Lila turned toward him. "It was nice meeting you, Aiden Cross, the man who rescues umbrellas." "And you, Lila Monroe, the woman who makes rainy days look like art." She laughed, her eyes bright. "Maybe I'll see you again," he nodded. "Maybe." But as she walked away, Aiden couldn't shake the feeling that maybe wasn't coincidence, that something in her smile, in the warmth she left behind, was meant to stay. That night, as he stood by his apartment window watching the rain return, Aiden whispered to himself, almost amused, "I think I just met someone who could change everything." He didn't know it then, but he was right. Weeks turned into months, and the connection between Aiden Cross and Lila Monroe grew deeper with every shared cup of coffee and every walk beneath the rain. What began as coincidence now felt like gravity, quiet, invisible, impossible to resist. They became inseparable in the city that never stopped raining. Aiden introduced Lila to his world of design. Quiet studios, green rooftops, the tranquil balance of stone and space. Lila, in turn, drew him into hers, full of color, chaos, and wonder. She showed him how beauty existed beyond blueprints, in moments that couldn't be planned. But for every shared moment, there was a shadow neither of them dared to name: time. Lila's career as a travel photographer meant she was never still for long. Her editor had already begun hinting at her next assignment, a global photo series that would take her across Europe and Asia for an entire year. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. One evening, as they sat at the same riverside cafe where their friendship had first deepened, Lila told him the news. Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled slightly around her coffee cup. "Aiden, I got an offer from the magazine," she said. "It's a full-year contract. Paris, Rome, Tokyo, all in one project." Aiden's heart sank, but he managed a faint smile. "That sounds incredible. It's everything you've worked for." She nodded, eyes downcast. "It is, but it means leaving Seattle. Leaving this." They fell into silence, the hum of the cafe filling the space between their unspoken fears. Finally, Aiden said quietly, "You have to go, Lila. You were never meant to stay in one place." She looked up, tears shimmering in her gray eyes. "And what about you?" "I'll be here," he said. "Designing gardens, rescuing umbrellas, waiting for your stories." She smiled sadly. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," he admitted. The night before her departure, they met one last time at the market where they'd first met. The stalls were closing, the lights dimming, but to Aiden it felt like the whole city had stopped just for them. She handed him a small envelope. "Something for you?" Inside was a single photograph, a candid shot of him standing by the flower stalls months ago. Unaware, she had taken it. "To remind you of where we began," she said softly. Aiden swallowed hard. "And what about you? What will remind you of me?" She smiled faintly. "The rain. It always will." Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. "Don't forget me, Aiden," he whispered back. "That's the one thing I'll never do." And then she was gone, swallowed by the world she was meant to explore. Days turned into weeks. Their messages began with energy, long paragraphs filled with stories of new cities and new adventures. But slowly, the distance grew heavier. The time zones widened the gap, and the calls became shorter. "Work's been crazy," she would say. "I'll call tomorrow." But tomorrow often never came. Aiden tried to fill his days with work. He poured himself into designs, creating landscapes that mirrored his feelings. Peaceful on the surface, but full of longing underneath. Yet every park bench, every stretch of ivy, reminded him of Lila. Months later, one evening as the rain returned to Seattle, his phone rang. "Aiden," came her voice, soft, tired, vulnerable. "Lila," he said quickly. "Are you okay?" There was silence, then a sigh. "I don't know. I should be happy. I'm doing what I love, seeing the world. But everything feels empty. I miss home. I miss—" She paused. "You miss what?" he asked gently. There was a soft breath on the line. "You." Aiden closed his eyes, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then come back." She hesitated. "I can't. Not yet." The call ended. The rain outside grew louder, blurring the lights of the city. Aiden sat by the window for a long time, staring into the gray. For the first time, he understood. Sometimes love isn't about holding on tight. It's about giving the other person the space to find themselves, even if it breaks your heart to let them go. A full year had passed since Lila Monroe boarded that plane. For Aiden Cross, time had moved both swiftly and painfully slow, days blending into weeks. weeks into months, all without her laughter echoing through his world. He had tried to move on, tried to convince himself that some people are just meant to pass through our lives, not stay. But every time he walked past the flower market or heard jazz in a cafe, her memory came back like sunlight through mist. Quiet, warm, inescapable. Then, one late afternoon in early spring, fate circled back. Aiden was walking home from a client meeting when a poster caught his attention outside a small art gallery downtown. Through Her Eyes, a photographic journey by Lila Monroe. He froze. His heartbeat stumbled. Without thinking, he stepped inside. The familiar scent of wood and paint surrounded him. People murmured softly as they admired the photographs. Cities bathed in morning light, faces filled with stories, oceans stretching endlessly. But one photo stopped him cold. It was Seattle, the flower market, rain-soaked and alive. And standing in the corner of the frame, slightly out of focus, was him. The day they met. A voice behind him said softly, "I never expected that picture to mean so much." He turned. Lila stood a few feet away, wearing a white dress and a soft smile that trembled at the edges. Her hair was shorter now, her eyes a little wiser, but she was still the same, the girl who had once turned a rainy afternoon into a memory that never faded. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The noise of the gallery vanished. "Lila," Aiden whispered. "You're here," she nodded, tears glimmering. For good this time. He took a slow step closer, still unsure if she was real. "You didn't tell me you were coming back." "I wanted to see if you'd find me," she said softly. "I thought maybe if you walked in and saw that photo, you'd know I never really left." He smiled faintly, his voice breaking. "Every place I went reminded me of you. The market, the rain, even the empty coffee cup on my table." Lila's eyes filled. "I thought leaving would make me stronger, that chasing the world would make me complete. But all it did was make me realize that home wasn't a place, it was a person." He stepped forward, gently brushing a tear from her cheek. "And you came back home," she nodded. "Only if you still want me here." He smiled, that quiet, steady kind of smile she'd missed so much. "Lila, I never stopped wanting that." They stood there for a moment. Two people who had loved, lost, and somehow found their way back through time and distance. As the gallery lights glowed softly around them, she took his hand and whispered, "You still believe in fate?" He looked at her, his thumb tracing her palm gently. "Now I do." And together they walked out of the gallery, the rain beginning once again. But this time, neither of them needed an umbrella. That evening, after leaving the gallery together, Aiden Cross and Lila Monroe walked through the quiet streets of Seattle. The rain had softened to a mist, turning the city lights into golden blurs. Neither of them spoke much. Words felt too fragile, too small for everything they felt inside. When they reached the riverside, the same place where they'd once sat and spoken about fate, Lila stopped. The water shimmered under the fading daylight, the same way it had the night before she left a year ago. Aiden glanced at her. "You still like this spot," he said softly. She smiled faintly. "It's the only place that ever felt still, even when everything else was moving too fast." They sat down on the bench overlooking the river. The air smelled like rain and memory. For a long while, they just sat there, letting silence speak for them. Finally, Lila turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you know how many times I wanted to come back?" Aiden looked at her, his gaze steady. "Every day I hoped you would," she exhaled shakily, her eyes glistening. "I told myself I left to find my dream. But every city I went to, every picture I took, it all kept leading me back to you. You were in every sunrise, every reflection, every story I tried to tell." Aiden's throat tightened. He looked down at the river, watching the ripples move across the surface. "When you left, I thought I was strong enough to let you go. But truth is, I never stopped waiting. Every morning, I'd make 2 cups of coffee. One for me, one for you, just in case you ever came back." Lila's lips trembled into a soft, tearful smile. "You waited?" "Always." There was a pause, quiet and electric, before he added, Because I love you, Lila. I always have." Her eyes widened, her breath catching. The words hung in the air. Simple, unadorned, but powerful enough to undo every wall she'd built around her heart. Tears slid down her cheeks. She reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. "I love you too, Aiden. I think I loved you before I even realized what love meant. You were in every photograph I took. Not your face, but your feeling. The way you made the world seem softer." Aiden turned toward her, his heart racing, his fingers brushing the tears from her skin. "Then don't leave again," he whispered. "I won't," she promised. "Not anymore. I've seen enough of the world to know what I was missing." The sky deepened to indigo as the first stars appeared above the river. Leila leaned closer, resting her forehead against his. For a moment there was no sound but the quiet hum of the city and the rhythm of their hearts. And then, at last, their lips met. Slow, certain, and filled with every unspoken word of the past year. It wasn't a kiss of beginning, but of return. A homecoming long overdue. When they finally pulled apart, Aiden whispered against her hair, "You were right that night." She looked up. "About what?" "That people meet for a reason." Lila smiled, tears and laughter blending together. "And our reason?" He brushed her cheek with his thumb and said, "To prove that even distance can't undo what's meant to be." The river shimmered beside them, a witness to their journey, their patience, and their promise. Years later, Aiden Cross and Lila Monroe stood hand in hand by the same river where it had all begun. The water glimmered under the sunset, and their little daughter laughed as she chased ripples along the shore. Lila leaned her head on Aiden's shoulder. "Do you still believe people meet for a reason?" she asked softly. He smiled, pressing a kiss to her hair. "I do, because my reason is standing right here." As the last light of day faded across the water, their love remained, quiet, enduring, and beautiful.